All right.
So welcome. This is Food Fun with Joanna. We are making turkey burgers tonight with a roasted broccoli and red pepper with fennel. I don't know if I want to call it a salad or a side dish, but either way, you can have it warm, or you can actually have it as a let it cool to room temperature and have it as a side salad. So I am Joanna Hodorowska. My company is Nutrition in Motion, and I help you put the fun back into taking care of you and really fueling your body, mind, spirit, and soul so that you find the absolute love in everything that you do. That's it in a nutshell, right?
Yep.
So welcome. Thank you, Shannon, for the idea of cooking online. And I'm just going to do what I do, and we're going to make the burgers and do all the prep stuff. And hopefully it'll only take about 30 to 40 minutes. Because everything that I do, especially with cooking, is if you can't make it in half an hour, it takes too much time.
Yep.
So the thing that we're going to start with first is actually the turkey. So I have actually the humongous, 3-pound container of turkey, and I have a big bowl. And just because we're here today, I'm just going to go ahead and make the whole thing. But if you only have one pound of turkey, that's going to be fine. I just decided that I'm going to make the whole thing because that way I cook once, make once, and I have it for leftovers. Make sense?
Okay. Yep.
So the first thing you do is dump the contents into your big bowl. And peel that thing off. And then you can actually use this to collect your trash as well from the other clippings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera a little bit so that you can actually see what it is that I am doing. Because that's the whole idea, right? And I think you can see what I'm doing. So I have it laid out here where I have, the leek, I have the rosemary, which now is dried rosemary, even though I bought it fresh. I have the red pepper. I have 2 heads of broccoli. I have an onion, because you can use an onion or a leek. And then the turkey in a bowl. So that's where we have started. And these are going to be for later. So I'm just going to work on the turkey for now. And because I had elephant garlic, I'm going to do the elephant garlic. And this is much stronger than regular garlic. So I can use the whole clove and be okay with it. I want to use this big knife. And when you're working with the knife, I'm just going to mute you for a second. Oops. When you're holding the knife, you actually want to have this one happens to be kind of a wooden handle, but you want it to be able to fit in the hand really well. You want to have a high quality knife, and I find that this big knife, even though it's the big butcher knife, it is very useful for chopping, and it takes a little while to get used to, but it's really handy. I have a knife sharpener too, because you always want a sharp knife. So I am going to sharpen the knife, but I also am going to tell you that I have this smaller knife as well that's almost like a paring knife, but it's a little bit bigger. It's more like the utility knife, so that I have that just in case when we get to the broccoli and the red pepper. So I'm going to take the garlic, and you can actually smash the garlic. Obviously, don't use don't get the hand on the edge of the knife because you might cut it. But we want to peel that garlic. And like I said, I have the almighty big elephant garlic, which is much milder, but you'll want to use 1 clove of garlic. And what you'll want to do is, this one happens to have a very, I don't know if you can see, it's a flat edge. So you want to actually cut it down the middle, but not all the way through. Can you see that? And then you're going to take that knife and you're going to just cut some slits into it. And then you're going to turn the knife, the garlic the other way, and you're going to hold on to the garlic with your fingernails. You're going to hold on to the garlic with your fingernails and then start slicing and dicing that garlic. And we're going to do the same thing with the onion. And then, of course, now I've got this base, so I'm just going to chop that up and dice it on its own. But you want to make them into like quarter, maybe like a half a centimeter kind of chunk. So that way you'll get more of it in more places. And then if you want to make it smaller, you'll just take that knife and chop it along the ends. So then you can have smaller pieces of garlic. And then you're going to scoop all that and put it in with your turkey. So just let me know when you have any questions, okay?
Yep.
Now we're going to take the onion. And you can use an onion, or like I have a leftover leek, you can use a leek instead because it gives a different kind of flavor. It's a little bit milder. But I'm going to go ahead and use the onion. And the first thing I'm going to do is chop that end off.
Yeah.
Chop the end off, and then I'm going to peel the onion. But one of the tricks I'm going to give you is you're going to peel this onion, and you're going to peel that next layer off, because that top layer of the onion is actually very slippery, so it'll be hard to cut. So you want to take that whole thing off, but keep this end, because you're gonna find out how it's going to be helpful in a minute. And then take this little invisible skin off as well. So I'm gonna get rid of my skins, because I don't want the skins in my turkey. And I'm gonna cut this in half. Again, I'm gonna hold it with the two ends and cut the onion right down the middle. Now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to cut the onion part way, and you're going to leave this on this end here. You're going to leave this end on so that you can actually hold on to it when you get to the other side. And then you're going to cut slits into here as well so that you can dice it. This is where a really sharp knife is good and handy. So here you're going to do the same thing. You're going to dice that onion and then put that into your turkey. So I'm just going to pick up the whole cutting board and just dump that all into the ground turkey. I'm going to get rid of more onion skins, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut the other half of the onion. So I'm going to, again, cut it part way, put the slits in it, And then dice it with the main part of the knife. And I'm having a hard time holding on to this one. Mine keeps falling apart. So if it does that, you just deal with it and throw it into the pot with the turkey. If you have fresh rosemary, which is what I'm going to use, then, I mean, this is actually dried rosemary now because it was fresh when I bought it. But you want to peel the rosemary off the vine by pulling it down. And you can chop it on the cutting board, but I find that it is actually, now that it's dried, I could probably just mash it with my fingers and break it into smaller bits. Or the other thing you can do is take some scissors and just cut it into smaller pieces. And I just find that the scissors are a little bit easier to use. And then your rosemary is in the bowl as opposed to all over the counter. Because that's typically what happens when I try to cut the rosemary on the cutting board. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my scissors and cut the rosemary. And I find that, more is better when it comes to rosemary, and the flavors will come out more the next day after you cook it.
So if I had just some dried rosemary, like a tablespoon for like 2
I would
pounds?
say a tablespoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a tablespoon. And then if you could just kind of break it up with your fingers into smaller pieces.
Okay.
And a lot of times you can just put it into the palm of your hand and use the fingers in the other hand to kind of break it into smaller pieces. But I happen to love rosemary. It's also anti-inflammatory, which is, extra bonus. But I just love the flavor of rosemary. And you might not notice the flavor as much today, but you'll totally notice it tomorrow. And my suggestion, and I'll probably repeat this later too, is cook them all today so that you have leftovers, rather than taking, like I've got the 3 pounds, rather than making the patties and then freezing them and then cooking them later. They get too wet if they get frozen and defrosted. And it's so much easier just to cook them all at one time and then freeze them in smaller containers when you're done. So that's the easy part with the turkey. Oh, look, I still have more rosemary over here hiding. And the other thing you're going to do now is I don't add an egg. I don't add anything except for some salt and pepper. And then for 1 pound, you basically will do a tablespoon, maybe 2, of ground flaxseed meal. So for what I'm doing here, I'm doing 2 1/3 cups. Make sense? But I'm using ground flaxseed meal.
Here, 2/3.
If you're using 3 pounds of turkey like I did, then you'll want to do 2/3 of a cup of the ground flaxseed. And now you're going to have to roll up your sleeves, because this stuff is really sticky, but I don't put an egg. I'm also going to put salt and pepper into it, and I have a pepper mill. So I'm going to be a little bit liberal with that, and I'm also going to put sea salt. which I have actually a Mediterranean sea salt, and I'm going to be liberal with that too. So you're probably putting a good teaspoon of salt and pepper in there. If you like more pepper, you can always add more pepper. If you need more salt later, you can always add it at the table. But if you put too much salt to start with, you're kind of in trouble. Now, the one thing I want to mention is you want to have your plate ready for your burgers, because you're going to make the burgers in the patties in a minute as well. I am going to suggest that you put gloves on. You don't have to, but it's just a little bit easier to put gloves on to mix and to make the patties. If you're going to be making a lot more than what you have on the plate, I will also suggest getting either freezer paper or parchment paper or wax paper to put as a layer in between the layers of your burgers. So now we get the fun part. Now we get to just mix it all together. So you're just going to flip it over and mix it, and keep doing this probably for a good 5 minutes until everything is kind of blended together. And the flax seeds are going to soak up any extra liquid so that you have better, firm burgers. And this is also a way of making the turkey burgers gluten-free. So we're just doing the turkey, the onions, the spices, salt, pepper, and then the flaxseed to give it some volume and some body, and absorb any of the excess liquid that may be present, especially when you go to cook it. So like I said, this is the hardest part, is using that big bowl and just a little bit of elbow grease to mash it all together. And then you get to decide whether you want to make big burgers or if you want to make little teeny burgers. I'm sure that if you wanted to, you could make these into little meatballs and just make some turkey balls. So I'm going to assume that mine's pretty well mixed. So now we're just going to start rolling it out. So I'm going to take a handful, and then that's about the size of the burger that I'm making. So depending on how big that first one is probably how big the rest of them will be. And for now, I think I'm just going to make the one layer rather than all of them, and just lay them out on the plate that I have on the side. And this is just time consuming. And if you put love into it, they'll taste better. So if you find this to be a fun and enjoyable activity, they'll taste better. I probably should have played music in the background or something just to make it a little bit more fun and interesting. So here we are, building our little burgers. And from the looks of it, I'm not even halfway, and I've already got 6 burgers. So this will make at least 12. And maybe I'll make it a baker's dozen and have it 13, but I probably won't make all of them right now. Actually, maybe I will just do it all and be done with it, right? Well, there's a whopper. The fun about making it yourself is that they all come out of different size. But the fun part is we get to cook later too. So now I'm going to take my my parchment paper that I tore and put it on top so that I can build the next layer. Because otherwise those burgers are going to stick to each other and you won't be able to take them apart. And like I said, this is all general. Nothing is going to be absolutely perfect. That's the fun of home cooking. Some are bigger, some are a little smaller. I think mine just got infinitely bigger. So I think I've got 3 more that I can make out of this. And 2 more. Last one. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and take off my gloves and dump it right into that bowl. And then I'm going to take that bowl and put it in the kitchen, in the sink. Normally I would actually wash that while I was cooking or while I was preparing, just because it makes it a little bit easier. You following along okay?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay, awesome. So now we get to do the other fun part, and I just realized that I forgot to do, I need a bowl to put the chopped broccoli and the red pepper into. So that is going to be the next thing that we do, and that's where you'll probably need both of these knives, both the big butcher knife and the utility knife. So I'm going to get myself a bowl. And you can tell I have all the old Pyrex bowls. They're oldies but goodies. They never go bad, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that red pepper. We're going to use that smaller utility knife and just cut down the middle from end to end. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that knife and turn it around to get that center piece out. And then you want to cut all these little edges out along with the extra, any extra seeds, because the seeds are not going to be good in the dish. So that's one side. Actually, I did mine pretty well. Surprise, surprise, I don't have to actually do anything with this one. So now what you want to do is you can either use this same paring knife, and you can either do it on the cutting board and make strips. Can you see the strips? So they're not going to be all the way across, they're going to be kind of slanted. And they're about maybe a ½ inch, maybe 1/3 of an inch to a ½ inch wide. But that'll just make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more fun rather than just straight strips. And then you're going to take those and dump them into the bowl and take the other half and do the same thing. And you could also, if you're very well skilled with that knife, you could actually just cut it this way while you're holding the pepper in your hand. There is no right or wrong way, it's just what you're most comfortable with. And I'm not sure one is faster than the other, it's just different. Whoops. So there's one pepper cut up. And now we're going to take our 2 heads of broccoli. And there's actually 2 ways of making this dish. And this is going to be the first time that I'm going to saute all of it together in the pan so that you don't have to steam the broccoli separately. And that's typically what I do, is I will steam the broccoli separately. But what I'm going to do is take my big butcher knife, chop that end off, and cut these into smaller pieces. And I'm going to try to make them longer with a little bit of the stalk as opposed to just little bits and pieces. So they're going to be about a 1/2 inch wide. And that way they'll cook a little bit faster and they won't be so hard to work with in the pan. So again, you're just going to take that big knife and cut the ends off, cut them into smaller strips. And something that's going to be almost bite-sized, but a little bit bigger than that. So they're all going to be about the same size, but they're just going to be these long, skinny broccoli florets. And again, you're going to dump that into that bowl. And now what I'm going to do, because now it's time to cook. So I have two. This is going to be the pan that I use for the turkey burgers. So I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know if you can see me. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over. And this way you can see my stove, right? One stove, two stove. Okay, so now you can see both parts. So this is going to be the one that I do the turkey burgers in, and I'm going to light my flame. And I think you can see that it's going to be a very low flame, and I want this pan to heat up adequately. I also have ghee, which is kind of like clarified butter. So I'm going to put some of that into the pan because it gives it that buttery flavor. But I'm also going to add some olive oil into there. So that's going to be for the turkey burgers. I'm going to do the same thing with the other burner, is I'm going to turn it on a medium flame. And I am going to pour about a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil into the pan. And just because I like the flavor of butter, I'm going to put some of that ghee into there as well, because I can then cook on higher heat and not have to worry that it's going to get burned. This is where you're going to just have to be a little bit patient and wait for the butter to melt and the pan to heat. And always make sure that the handles are away from the edge, because that way you won't accidentally knock it over. And then you'll have oil and all the food on the floor, and that would not be a good place for it. So I'm waiting for my one pan to heat up, but this is where I'm going to take a handful, or basically a teaspoon of the fennel seeds, and I'm going to put them into that pan. And actually, I think I need a little bit more. So you're going to do somewhere between 1 and 2 teaspoons of fennel into the pan. And what you're going to cook first is the broccoli, because the broccoli takes a little bit longer than the peppers. And if you wanted to add onions in there, you could, but we're just going to use the fennel. And you don't have to worry about the fennel needs to be toasted or anything of that nature. It's all going to get toasted soon enough. But make sure that the oil is covering the pan before you add the broccoli, which is what I'm going to do now, is add the broccoli. And I'm going to add the broccoli and cook that for probably 3 or 4 minutes before I add the peppers. So that'll give the broccoli a little extra time to get soft. And you want to make sure you toss it all together so that it's evenly coated in the pan. And we're just going to let it sit there for a couple minutes. And it's almost as fun as watching paint dry, but it's actually a little bit better because you can watch the fennel seeds sizzling. And you'll know if it's too high a heat, if it's sizzling too much. So right now I have it on a little bit too high of a heat, so I have to turn it down just a tiny bit. You could also use a wok if that's the only thing you have available. And you're going to mix it again. What you're wanting to see is that it has a little bit of, it's still going to retain the greenness. And I have to actually add a little bit more olive oil to mine. So I'm going to add another tablespoon of olive oil. And then I'm going to dump the red peppers in. How's it coming along on your end?
It's going good. We got everything cooking.
All right. So now you should probably have the, and that you can kind of leave for a minute, but now your other pan is probably heated up. So this is where you're going to put your turkey burgers in. And you can put them right next to each other, almost one on top of each other, because they will shrink a little bit. And I would suggest putting the one in the middle in before you do the ones all the way on the outside. But you should be able to fit 6 of them on the pan. And if you have one of these screens, this will help to keep it from splattering all over the place. And because I touched the turkey, I have to go wash my hands again. So you're basically going to cook the turkey about 4 to 5 minutes on each side. So that's been about a minute. Now I'm going to go back to my broccoli and red peppers and stir them again. And you want to make sure that you're mixing it from underneath and turning it over, underneath and turning it over. Now we're just going to let them sit there for another couple of minutes. If you want to put a little bit of sea salt on them, now would be a good time to do that too. The turkey burgers still have another minute or two on that, on the one side. I don't know if you can see how my broccoli has a little bit of brown in some spaces. That's actually going to give it some extra flavor. So the way that you'll know when it's time for you to flip the burgers, can you see how the burger is kind of it's turning from pink to white, almost halfway up the burger? That's when you have a good idea of when it's ready to flip. And I'm an impatient bugger, so I'm going to flip mine now. So I'm going to flip each one, and then it's typically nicely browned on the one side. And then because they're really thick burgers, what you're going to do now is you're going to take your spatula and maybe, you know, the knife that you had, and you're going to press the burgers down to flatten them out a bit. And that'll also reduce some of the cooking time because now they're not quite as thick. Can you see what I'm doing, Shannon? How's yours turning out?
They're browning up good.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the broccoli by taking my, what do you call this? My utility knife, and just kind of stabbing it to see if it's tender or al dente or what it is. And it still needs another minute because it's kind of crunchy. But that'll be the way that you'll test to see if the broccoli is ready. Is you want to just kind of stab it with a knife, and if it goes in easily, then you know it's totally cooked. If you want it more al dente, then you can turn it off. The other thing is that it's almost ready. I could also turn it off now and just let it keep simmering on its own. If you have an electric stove, I would definitely turn the heat off and just let it simmer there on the stove as is. And the same thing with the burgers. I don't know if you can see my burgers here. See how there's still a little bit of pink in here? Can you see there's a little bit of pink? So that means that they're not quite ready yet. So I'm going to leave them there for another minute or two. And I'm going to go get myself a plate. Because the fun part is we get to eat. But if you notice what time it is, It's only 6:15 and we started at 5:35. And we are almost ready to actually eat. I'm gonna test my burger. I'm gonna take the center one and cut it down the middle. And it still needs just a little bit more. So I'm gonna turn the heat up a teeny bit higher. And I'm gonna press them down a little bit more. And then we should be ready to eat in a couple minutes. And then when we're done with all of this, I'm gonna actually cook the rest of the burgers so that I'll have them all made. And then I will put them into the freezer, into their own respective containers, so that I can have turkey burgers whenever I want for the next 2-3 weeks. Or it could be 2-3 months. All right, so I'm gonna check that one burger again and see if it is cooked. And I'm gonna flip these over one more time. And dinner is almost gonna be ready. How's yours look on your side, Shannon?
Our turkey is cooking a little bit slower than yours.
Okay. Do you have a gas stove or electric?
Electric.
Okay, that might be why.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit longer for that electric element to heat up.
Okay.
So that might be the little bit of a delay.
Okay. It's getting there, but it's just not as.
It's not quite as fast as mine.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I think that's why, like I grew up with electric, and it ended up being one of those, once I discovered gas cooking, I could never go back.
Yeah.
They're just different,
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I don't know. I think I've always had electric.
I grew up with it, and it works just fine. It's just one of those things where I have gotten so accustomed to the gas that even when I go visit my parents, I have to remember, like, oh yeah, it takes longer to heat up, and oh yeah, it stays on longer. So when you turn it off, it's not actually off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it still cooks. It still cooks. It's just getting used to a slightly different setting. So mine actually looks ready. And I only have enough vegetables for like me today and me tomorrow. that's like one meal for me. So it's like, well, but that's at least I still have one thing that I can have for lunch tomorrow, and I don't have to cook it yet again. But this is the finished product.
Perfect.
Yeah. And if you wanted to add a potato to it, you could. I mean, you could either, you could probably dice potatoes and put it in with the broccoli. You could put sweet potatoes in there. You could make even like the red lentil pasta. That could be a good option. Or you could just roast some potatoes in the oven and they'll be done in the same amount of time that you do everything else.
Awesome.
So there you have it. It's like 45 minutes from start to finish with all the prep work. And I'm actually going to try it.
Go for it.
Because that's the best part. Bon appetit. They're so good.
Oh yeah, there we go.
You all good? Yeah, you're cooking up.
I flipped one of the other ones again because it was just.
No, you're doing good.
Yeah.
All right. This
Now
was
for
fun.
the
Matthew's doing good. Matthew's doing good.
The broccoli and red pepper is pretty awesome too.
Yeah.
And even though it's like different spices, they actually complement each other. So I will be posting I have actually the recipes on my website. So if you go to www.nutritioninmotion.net and go under recipes, you'll see one that's the roasted red pepper and broccoli. And I think it might be called a salad. And then the turkey burgers are also on there as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, Joanna Hodorowska, Nutrition in Motion, www.nutritioninmotion.net. And if you have any things that you have challenges with cooking and want me to do on a future Food Fun with Joanna, then send me an email once you get to my website. Have a great night.